there are a lot of people who function quite nicely in society, who seem like they have got it all together, who come across as if they have it all figured out, but somewhere they have a suitcase hidden because they are in some kind of pain. And if you look closely, you will see it in their faces, you will hear it in their voices, you will sense it in the stoop of their shoulders, you will look at it in the sadness in their eyes and the weariness in their walk. Some people, beneath all that facade, are living hard, despairing lives. And they are longing on the inside to be set free. And for many of us, the past keeps intruding into the present. Something that happened in your life many years ago still has an emotional scar in your life today that still aches. And let me tell you this, these emotional scars from your past most probably came from some authority figure who treated you badly. Maybe a teacher who didn't know how to mix fairness with discipline. And then you look back on the tirades of the teacher and you still wince about that hurt. Maybe it was older children who chose you as their target of cruelty. And any variation from that norm, too small, too big, or just too different somehow, seem to have triggered a response to bully you. You never did anything to them, but for some reason they just chose to torment you and bully you. Maybe you were a good scholar, but you'll never forget how all the sports guys in college made fun of your lack of athletic ability. Maybe you had a good personality, but you'll never forget somebody making fun of your physical appearance. And it's amazing how we can recall almost verbatim some things that were spoken to us as children and even as teenagers. And those videotapes keep replaying in our minds. Maybe you were wounded by an alcoholic father who terrified you, or by an inconsistent mother who wasn't there for you. There are husbands and wives who live under the same roof but barely speak because resentment has built up over the years. Maybe you were cheated out of money or a position at work, and it's easy to let resentment toward the offender build over a period of time. The point I'm trying to make is this: scars and hurts from the past can stay in your minds forever. And instead of letting the wound gradually heal, leaving a light scar, resentment keeps picking the scab and putting the videotape back to watch it again and again and again. And we keep a record of the wrong and we keep underscoring it in our ledger. And I don't know how many great things that Buddha said. I don't read a lot about Buddha, but one thing he said that was pretty sensible. He said that holding on to bitterness is like grasping a hot coal in your hands with the intention of throwing it at someone only to realize that your hands got burned. So when I thought about this title, getting that even feeling out of your heart, all of you probably by now know that I'll be preaching this Sunday morning on the subject of bitterness. Bitterness. The prophetic word for this month is God healing us in our emotionally hidden areas. How many of you have been emotionally wounded at some point in your life? All of us have been wounded at some point in our life. And one of the areas that we're going to deal with this Sunday is bitterness. And there's a verse that I want to draw your attention to. Is in Hebrews chapter 12, verses 15. Looking carefully, lest anyone fall short of the grace of God. And look what it says next. Lest any root of bitterness spring up, causing trouble, and by this many becoming defiled. Lest any root of bitterness springing up may cause trouble, and by the intention of what the author is trying to say, defiling you. How do we get this get even feeling? When you think about that teacher, when you think about that parent, when you think about that sibling, when you think about that coach, when you think about that person in college, when you think about that boss, when you think about that person who abused you, when you think about that person who ill-treated you, how do you get that get even feeling out of your heart? You see, bitterness is the result of feeling that someone has done us wrong, or life just hasn't gone our way. When life hasn't gone our way, bitterness sets in. When someone has done you some kind of wrong, bitterness sets in. And I define bitterness this way. Bitterness is harbored hurt hidden in the heart. Simple. Bitterness is harbored hurt hidden in the heart. Because bitterness is an attitude, a state of one's heart which reflects in the countenance and the tone of voice. Bitterness is an attitude, a state of your heart which reflects on your face and just by the tone of your voice. So, where does bitterness evolve from? Bitterness evolves from, number one, very important, unresolved expectations. Bitterness evolves from unresolved expectations. Number two, bitterness evolves from a frustration of unfulfilled desires. Number three, bitterness evolves from a sense of unfulfillment in life in general. Number four, bitterness evolves from a sense of personal failure. Number five, bitterness evolves from a sense of being treated unfairly. And number six, bitterness evolves from a tension that comes when you are hopeless about a situation. You can't do anything about it. And we can be aware of bitterness in our heart, but the problem with our heart is it is a very deceitful heart. And you can never fathom its depth. Every unexplored heart issue that you are carrying will give root to some form of bitterness. And if you do not cut bitterness at the root, you will carry it to the grave. And that's a major problem with bitterness. Because if it is allowed to fester, it will become very deadly. And here are some more symptoms of hidden bitterness. Maybe when I read it out, you will be able to understand if you are really in that season of your life. Criticalness or judgmentalness, always finding something wrong, means there's some kind of bitterness in your heart. Number two, impatience and restlessness is also a good gauge of some kind of bitterness in your heart. Number three, isolation. Being a loner, isolating yourself is a good gauge of some kind of bitterness in your heart. Number four, infirmities. Could be all kinds of infirmities, right? Anything in your body. That's also a good gauge of some kind of bitterness in your heart. Another area is your relationships don't last. You start something and then you kill it in 6 months, kill it in 3 months, kill it in just a year. And many of relationships are disappointing. You're not fulfilled. That's a good gauge. There's some kind of bitterness in your heart. Anger is a good gauge of some kind of bitterness in your heart. Rage, grief, depression, withdrawal, suicidal thoughts. All these areas that I'm highlighting for you this morning are a gauge of some kind of bitterness in your heart. And we want to understand this one verse which says, and the Hebrew writer says, look carefully lest anyone fall short of the grace of God. So the Hebrew writer has to say that. He has to emphasize grace because we are under grace. That's the new covenant. That's the new dispensation. That's the new law. That's the new life in Christ. So he says, be careful that you don't fall from the grace of God by allowing roots of bitterness to spring up on the inside, and as he says in the verse, that cause trouble, and by this many become defiled. So I'm going to help you understand the first part. And the first part is this: look diligently or look carefully lest you fall short of the grace of God by allowing bitterness to spring up that can cause trouble and defile you. Now, in this verse, as I understand it in the original Greek, bitterness is described as a root. So a root for me is something that is beneath the surface. A root for me is something that is invisible to the eye, but it is as real as a tree itself. Can you see the roots of a banyan tree? But do you know how big a banyan tree can get? So as real as the tree is, that's how real the root is. And it is a deep root because even though it is not far from the surface, it stretches deep into the soil. And likewise, roots of bitterness, and I highlighted for you so many areas and so many manifestations of this root of bitterness. Roots of bitterness, though never far from the surface of one's lips, they reach deep into the soil of your heart. Someone said, the root of bitterness takes very little soil, it needs very little cultivation, but it very quickly grows. And it's very difficult to remove. It's easy to plant the seed of bitterness. It's extremely difficult to weed it out. Now do you understand why the Hebrew writer is warning the church? That you don't fall from the grace of God by allowing roots of bitterness in your heart. And that is why on this first Sunday, Communion Sunday, we must make an effort to deal with the source of our bitterness if we're ever going to get a handle on it. And to do that, you must understand most people are bitter because of three reasons. You want to know what those three reasons are? Number one, you're bitter because of what has been done to you. Number two, you're bitter because of what is said about you. And number three, you're bitter because of what is taken from you. What is done to you makes you bitter. What is said to you makes you bitter. And what is taken from you makes you bitter. But I think about Jesus, my role model, who dealt with all three of these problems in one sermon that he called the Sermon on the Mount. And concerning what is said about it, Jesus said, blessed are you when they revile and persecute you and say all kinds of evil against you falsely for my sake. Rejoice and be exceedingly glad, for great is your reward in heaven. For so they persecuted the prophets who were before you. So what Jesus is saying in that verse is, if someone has ever said anything that was defamatory, slanderous, hurtful, untrue, congratulations, you're in a great company. Because they did the same thing to the prophets, they did the same thing to Jesus, and they're going to do the same thing to you. So, the first area where we get bitter, when people say things to us, Jesus already gave the answer. Then, he said, you have heard it said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, but I tell you not to resist an evil person. But whoever slaps you on your right cheek, turn the offer, or turning the other cheek also to him. What Jesus was saying is, it's not what happens to you that's important. It's how you react to what happens to you that really counts. Jesus addressed even that area. And then there's another passage that says, if anyone wants to sue you and take away your tunic, let him have your cloak also. And whoever compels you to go 1 mile, go with him 2. Go to him who asks you, and from him who wants to borrow from you, do not turn away. Someone may borrow from you and never pay it back. They may borrow something from your home and you will never see it again. Mark this down. When someone does you wrong, they will sooner or later have 1 or 2 choices. You can get bitter or you can get better. But you must first of all learn to deal with the source of all bitterness. And most people are bitter because of what is done to them, what is said to them, and what is taken from them. And so this Hebrew writer is helping us understand today that if you want to get this get even feeling out of your heart, number 1, look at what he says. Be careful not to let any root of bitterness take shape in the soil of your heart. Whatever reason. I know they said those things to you. I know they did that to you. I know they took that from you. In spite of that, do not allow any root of bitterness to take shape in the soil of your heart. Get rid of it. Confess it. Forgive them. Let it go. The next thing he says is, in that same verse, he talks about how this root of bitterness can cause trouble. If you do not do that, if you don't uproot bitterness from your heart, it will cause trouble. Now, if a bitter root is in your heart, what do you think will be the outcome? Bitter fruit. Yes? So bitterness causes trouble for everybody. Ann Landers once said, bitterness is like acid. It can damage the vessel in which it is stored, as well as destroy the object on which it is poured. It can destroy the vessel in which it is stored, as well as the object on which it is poured. There's an ancient Roman story that said that the soldiers of Caesar became dissatisfied with their rations one day and with the way they were being treated. They could not complain to Caesar, so they became angry with the gods. Many of them shot their arrows towards the heavens, hoping to hit the gods. But instead, several of them were wounded or killed, as their own arrows with high velocity fell back to the earth and pierced their own hearts. That's what happens when people are bitter. Because bitterness has a way of mentally dominating you. And when it starts mentally dominating you, the things that people said to you, the things that people did to you, the things that were taken from you, you know what happens? This root will take more and more place in the soil of your heart. And it's like a plant, it's called the kudzu. The kudzu is a vine-like plant that grows like wildfire and takes over everything it can. And you can't even get rid of it, they say, with an atomic bomb. Likewise, this bitterness that the Hebrew writer is warning us will absorb you like a sponge, and like a magnet you will find that your mind is drawn again and again to that person, to that situation, to that event, to that memory, to that hurt, to that pain, again and again, and make you more and more bitter. Years ago, a brilliant doctor by the name of S.I. McMillan wrote a best-selling book entitled None of These Diseases. In that book, Dr. McMillan points out how bitterness can consume a person both physically and mentally. He said, the moment I start hating a person, I want you all to pay attention to this. The moment I start hating a person because of what was said to me, because of what was done to me, because of what was taken from me, the moment I start hating a person, I become that person's slave. I can't enjoy my work anymore because he's controlling my thoughts. And my resentments produce too many stress hormones in my body, and I become fatigued only in a few hours of work. And the man that I hate, or the person that I hate, hounds me wherever I go, and I just can't escape this tyrannical grasp on my mind. And he says, the man I hate, he may be many miles away from my bedroom, but more cruel than slave driver. He whips my thoughts into such a frenzy that my inner spring mattress becomes a rack of torture. It's so dangerous to think of what the roots of bitterness can do to your life. Because bitterness is a depressant. If you look closely, you will find there are no happy, bitter people. Some of you got it. There is no such thing as happy, bitter people. Because criticism, cynicism, negativism, pessimism are all the marks of a bitter person. And it has a way of depressing us and saddening us and even getting us to the point where we can't even function in a normal fashion. And it happens time and time again. So bitterness will cause you to burn down your house to kill a rat. Anybody get that? To cause you to burn down your house to kill a rat. But bitterness can also physically debilitate you. The human body was not created, church, to nurse bitterness and carry grudges. God never gave you this body to nurse bitterness and carry grudges. And this doctor in that book enumerated over 50 diseases, from ulcers that some of you are dealing with in the summer, to high blood pressure, all because of this one emotion of bitterness. Now, I am not trying to imply that every sick person was bitter before he got sick. But every bitter person who remains bitter will get sick. That is why you better determine the course of your bitterness and understand as quickly as you can today that bitterness promises too much and pays too little, and the price is too high. Bitterness promises too much, pays too little, and the price is too high. So we know from what the Hebrew writer is saying, the root of bitterness is very dangerous. And then we know that that root can lead to many other kinds of problems. So what's the challenge? In order to defeat bitterness, every day our bodies cleanse themselves, right, of harmful toxins through the processes of waste elimination. So these toxins, those of you science students, right, were allowed to accumulate, they would cause you to fall sick and eventually kill you. In the same way, if you want to remain mentally healthy, you must get rid of toxins that are in your mind. And how do you deal with bitterness? The most simplest advice experts give on dealing with bitterness is forget it. Forget it. Whatever caused the problem, forget it. Whatever they said to you, forget it. Whatever they did to you, forget it. Whatever they took away from you, forget it. Because you must be willing to put away. And the phrase put away means to dispose of, to discard, to get rid of. Now, no one in the Bible outside of Jesus was more mistreated than a man named Joseph. But I don't want to focus on those years of Joseph, of how he could have got bitter. But I want to focus on the part where he married an Egyptian woman who bore him 2 sons. This is so powerful. The firstborn's name was Manasseh. And the second son's name was Ephraim. You know why are their names so important to me today? Because the guy that went through all that turmoil and pain and being let down by his own brothers, and when he had his sons, he names them Manasseh and Ephraim. You know what Manasseh literally means? Manasseh means remembering no more. And you know what Ephraim means? Ephraim means success. So for Joseph, when he had those 2 boys, those 2 boys commemorated the fact that God had taken out the sting from all those memories that he had to go through when his brothers let him down. And he named Manasseh and Ephraim. So every time he would see them, he would remind himself, or those boys would remind him, that I will remember no more the sting of all my memories, and I will see success. And God made this guy a success in the land where he had been once a slave and a prisoner. Now, Joseph didn't really forget what happened to him in one sense, but on the other hand, he was able to put it away. He was able to leave it behind. And that's one of the most important things you'll have to do. If you have to deal with this root of bitterness, because if you don't deal with it, it will cause other problems for you. And you want to be in this place like Joseph, where you remember no more. Because when you make a conscious effort to put things behind you and to let it go, God is going to take you to a place of freedom and liberty to walk victoriously on earth. You know, one day when God closes the curtains of time and He draws the shades on the windows of history, you will look back and see that bitterness ruined more marriages, bitterness soured more lives, bitterness divided more churches, bitterness killed more business deals than any other thing. And hell is a bitter place filled with bitter people. People who are bitter because they listen to the wrong voice. People who are bitter because they ran with the wrong crowd. People who are bitter because they made the wrong decisions. People who are bitter because they served the wrong God. And the greatest bitterness a person will ever know is the bitterness of being in hell. Yet knowing he could have been in heaven if he had simply received Jesus Christ as his Lord and Savior. Remember how when the Israelites were at Marah, God's remedy at Marah was to sweeten the water with a tree. And God had Moses throw a tree in the water and it became sweet. That's Old Testament. In the New Testament, as we prepare to come to this table, that tree is a type of the cross, and it's called the tree of Calvary. The only way you can deal with bitterness this morning is if you come to this tree called the tree of Calvary. Because this is your only hope. This is your only freedom. This is your only breakthrough. This is your only solution. You will not come to some point in time where you're going to feel like letting those people go, like putting it away, leaving it behind. But I'm inviting you this Sunday morning, this communion Sunday morning, to the tree of Calvary. The only offer, the only hope, the only solution, the only freedom, the only life, the only future we have. You won't ever get to that place, but first you have to come to the tree of Calvary and face the fact that there is only one thing you can do, and that is to do what was done for you. That is forgive. And you know, one thing I've learned about forgiveness, before I got married, a friend of mine in Washington, D.C., who's a software engineer, we got on a call and we were just talking. And he was excited, he's excited getting married. So I said, give me one good advice on marriage. Because if I ask, people, all these married guys, they'll keep talking. So I said, no, only one advice you give me. So he said, only one thing I'll tell you. Be a good forgiver, he said. That's it. It takes two forgivers to make a good marriage. But one thing I've learned in marriage is forgiveness is a death experience. You have to die to yourself to forgive. And I'm inviting anybody on this Sunday morning, even those of you online who have your elements with you. Are you willing to come and have this death experience today? Where you die to yourself. Yes, they said those things to you. Yes, they took those things away from you. Yes, they did that to you. But you have to come to a place you say, God, I'm going to let this thing go. I'm going to let this thing go. And there's a poem, it says, God, you are perfect, you can do no wrong. I am wrong, you are right. I do now renounce and expel all bitterness I have toward you and any other person. And that is when you will walk in total freedom. There's something else I found out about Marah. After God turned the waters and made them sweet, God gave the people of Israel a revelation of who He was. The only other revelation He had specifically given was when Abraham took his son up the mountain, right? And the Bible says, on the mountain of the Lord it shall be provided. So Jehovah Jireh was revealed on that mountain. At the bitter waters of Marah, what name God revealed to the people of Israel? That is where He revealed Himself as Jehovah Rapha. That I am the Lord who heals you. He had to bring these guys to a place where they were so bitter with everything that was going on in their life. And there He revealed who He really was, which was Jehovah Rapha, their healer. So knowing how desperately wicked your heart can be, and my heart can be, I'm asking and inviting you today to reveal to the Holy Spirit any bitterness in your heart. You hold nothing back that you're harboring in your heart, and willingly choose to release any issue so that when you come to this table on this communion Sunday, every bitterness in your heart, what was said to you, what was done to you, what was taken from you, which makes you feel like life is so unfair. He went so early. This happened to this person. Why did he have to fall sick? Why did he have to die? All that which has led to roots of bitterness that's causing trouble in your life. You need to come to this tree to find life. Come to this tree. You know why I say come to this tree? Because there was a tree that was thrown into the water that made those bitter waters sweet. There is a tree this Sunday morning, if you come to, will turn that sour life and make it sweet. And you need to come to this place today with God and say, God, this message is for me. Because I came with all kinds of mental oppression and all kinds of physical oppression. I've seen people mentally, oppressed. I've seen people, physically ill. And many of those people, if you kind of study them and, just look at their life, everything has some root of bitterness. And God says, this Sunday morning, I am bringing deliverance. I am Jehovah Rapha, the Lord who heals you. So I don't know those moments and those memories and those hurts and those events that took place in your life where people said stuff to you, they did stuff to you, they took stuff away from you. But what if you came to this tree this Sunday morning? He's willing to turn those sour thoughts and make them sweet. He's willing to take those bad thoughts and bring you new thoughts. He's able to take all those bad memories and turn it into good memories. If you will only trust the tree, that when we come to this tree, the tree of Calvary, we are going to experience a sweetness in the atmosphere, a sweetness in our life that will change everything bitter. Everything that you see that is making you feel so bitter, God is going to sweeten it this Sunday morning.